We just spoke with Mehdi Hasan. He was on Piers Morgan's show yesterday debating the term Intifada, right? Because this is the key. Like, we're going to criminalize all of these words, demonize them.
Scary sounding, Arabic, terrorism, right?
Intifada, river, sea, from the. These are all very dangerous words. We can't be uttered. If you utter these words, we know that you're a danger and we don't need to engage with you.
And cops get to bonk you.
Intifada means uprising.
Well, here is Mehdi Hasan setting Piers Morgan straight on the term Intifada.
These protests at all, to which I would say I absolutely believe in the right to protest peacefully. I believe in free speech emphatically as you do. I think we're in agreement on that. But if people are going to do things like chant about an intifada, and I know you picked me up on X earlier about do I know the meaning of intifada? Well, here's what I know. There have been two intifadas involving the Israel-Palestine conflict, and it led to many thousands of deaths. But both...
I want to be a little nitpicky here. The first Intifada started off very, very peaceful, and it did lead to 1,000 deaths, and it was 1,000 Palestinians. The first Intifada started the most violence, and in terms of occupation, it was kids throwing small rocks at fully up-armored Israeli soldiers and vehicles. And then they just started firing on them. So it's a little nitpicky, but we don't even need that. We don't even need that little nitpick. Continue.
It led to many thousands of deaths, but both were driven by violence. I mean, they weren't peaceful intifadas. By very definition, these uprisings were violent and involved extreme violence, particularly the second one, which involved blatant acts of terrorism. So that is my understanding of an intifada. There have also been many other things in the last 30 years in the world which have been dubbed intifadas. And the one common denominator is they've all involved violent uprisings. In fact, I can't think of, unless you can correct me, when was the last...
Yeah, I can.
When was the last entirely peaceful intifada?
So in 2011, in the Arab Spring, the Tunisians rose up peacefully. I'm sure you supported them, I did, against their dictator, Ben Ali. The Egyptians rose up in Tahrir Square. I think you supported them, I certainly did, against Mubarak, against these dictators that we in the West have been supporting. Those were referred to. You can go back and look at the Arabic press. You can look at the BBC Arabic coverage as intifadas. We can go back further. In fact, we can go back to a violent uprising that we all supported. The Warsaw Ghetto, Piers. The Warsaw Ghetto, right? Polish Jews standing up against the Nazis. Do you know how the US Holocaust Memorial Museum describes the Warsaw Ghetto on its Arabic page? It calls it the Warsaw
But you wouldn't categorize.
Hold on, let me finish my point. Let me finish my point, and then you come back in. The Warsaw Intifada, we're not calling the Jews in Poland who stood up against the Nazis as terrorists. So no, I don't believe that Intifada in and of itself is a terroristic or violent phrase. And the first Intifada was largely non-violent for the first year. Palestinians were killed at a rate of 27 times the number of Israelis who were killed. Rabin, do you remember Rabin, Nobel Peace Laureate?
Yeah.
He said, break their bones. The violence came largely from the Israeli side in the first Intifada. So just to be clear, that's what Intifada means, uprising. These students are not calling for violence. They're not. If they wanted to, they'd call for violence. They'd call for suicide bombings. They're calling for an uprising, Piers.
Yeah, but they're calling for an intifada. They're chanting about intifada, and
Which you and I have a different definition of, and you're not an Arab, so with respect, I'm telling you, intifada is used for peaceful uprisings as well.
Hang on, just to narrow the debate onto this, there have been two intifadas in this conflict, and they've both been violent.
And I just told you the first one was largely non-violent.
Well, it was only non-violent for the first few...
Israel,
it was actually only non-violent for the first few months. It then became...
The violence was from Israel.
Well, it became increasingly violent.
If you're getting shot by Israelis with live ammo...
Well, there were many deaths...
Yes, and I would too. If I was doing...
OK, but here's my point. They were both violent. So when those protesters chant about intifada...
Here's my point. I'm going to ignore everything you've just told me and stay on my point, because my point is... is like the bulletproof vest that the Israeli soldiers who are getting pebbles and rocks thrown at them.
Yeah.
It's an amazing definition of violence, right? Like when they tried to cross the bridge in Selma, was that a violent protest? I mean, there were water cannons used. There were water cannons. That's not, now granted, they were done. The water cannons were from the cops, but even still,
But
is that safe?
it's irrelevant.
Would you bring your little kids out if there were water cannons, Matt?
No, but
Okay.
But like the violence thing that flattens. Oh well, who knows who made it violent? It's just it got violent.
Right.
This is Nelson Mandela talking about South Africa. Now maybe people.
I was just about to read a quote from there.
People might object to the comparison. I do not. I think it's relevant. Mandela writes in The Long Walk to Freedom, over and over again, we had used all the nonviolent weapons in our arsenal: speeches, deputations, threats, marches, strikes, stayaways, voluntary imprisonment. All to no avail. For whatever we did was met by an iron hand. A freedom fighter learns the hard way that it is the oppressor who defines the nature of the struggle, and the oppressed is often left no recourse but to use the methods that mirror those of the oppressor. At a certain point, one can only fight fire with fire. I mean, the only question is Israel-Palestine comparable to that? And I agree with everyone, including Mandela, who says it is.
Yeah, he also said, I and some colleagues came to the conclusion that as violence in this country was inevitable, it would be wrong and unrealistic for African leaders to continue preaching peace and nonviolence at a time when the government met our peaceful demands with force. It was only when all else had failed, when all channels of peaceful protest had been barred to us, that the decision was made to embark on violent forms of political struggle. And that is a direct quote from Mandela, and also just true in this instance, right? I mean, there's a reason that the apartheid South African government was very close with the Israeli government before apartheid fell in South Africa, and that's that same history that spurred or allowed for the South African government to take up this case in the ICJ accusing Israel of genocide. It's that continued history and understanding that makes people see exactly what this is.
What's really going on here is it's just the use of an Arabic word.
Yep.
Right? Like,
exactly.
Because I got news for you. You know what else is violent? Revolution. And guess how this country got started? From a revolution.
Even Israel,
I mean, have you heard some of these business meetings where they talk about, like, this is a revolution in communications? It's like, do we really want that kind of violence in communications?
Yeah.
Or when they say, like, this is a revolution in whatever product it is they're rolling out. People don't get on the television and go, you can't use that word. Because the American Revolution was violent.
What was
absurd.
What was Chicago saying about what were they calling the encampment? They were saying that was in some way a violent word because it evoked military usage. I mean,
etymologically.
Yeah, right.
If Menachem Begin bombed the King David Hotel for a multi-ethnic democracy that we all could look forward in the Middle East, we would all be fine with it.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.